Hello everyone! In this video we're going to define the key terms from period 1. These terms are commonly seen in the primary sources the College Board uses, as well as the questions and possible answers. I highly recommend taking notes during the video, as that will help with retention. Okay, let's get started. Around 6000 BC, Mesoamericans began cultivating maize into a nutritious crop. It had a higher yield per acre than wheat, barley, or rye, the staple cereals of Europe. The resulting agricultural surpluses encouraged population growth and laid the foundation for wealthy urban societies. Later, the Mississippi Valley and the southeastern woodlands of North America had cultures defined by the successful agriculture of maize. The Great Basin region is located between the Rocky and Sierra Nevada mountains and is characterized as a high desert climate. Native Americans who lived there relied on a mostly hunter-gatherer lifestyle with some dry cultivation of maize. In the Great Plains region, there was some agriculture along rivers. However, this land was dominated by hunter-gatherer societies. They were transformed by Europeans who brought horses and livestock. Tribes such as the Comanche, Sioux, and Crow adapted the horse to their culture and dominated their opponents who were on foot, allowing them to obtain vast amounts of territory through raids. Bison hunting, the main food and supply source, was also dramatically changed as hunters who previously relied on stealth became much more successful on horseback. Hunter-gatherers were individuals, groups, and tribes that relied on finding and hunting for their subsistence. They tended to be very mobile, and some moved with wild animal migrations. In pre-Columbus Native American tribes in the Great Plains and Great Basin tended to be hunter-gatherers, and some in the upper Midwest and Northeast were partially nomadic with aspects of settled agriculture and hunter-gathering. In the Northeast and along the Atlantic seaboard, some societies developed a mixed agricultural and hunter-gatherer economy that favored the development of permanent villages. In the Northeast and along the Atlantic seaboard, some societies developed a mixed agricultural and hunter-gatherer economy that favored the development of permanent villages. In the economies of the Spanish colonies, Native American labor was used in the encomienda system to support plantation-based agriculture and extract precious metals, especially silver. And Native American labor was gradually replaced by African slavery. Native Americans migrated across the North American continent. As time went on, the settlers had to adapt to change their societies to better fit the environment they were living in. In contrast to the hunter-gatherer Great Basin, Great Plains societies, those in the Northeast, Southeast, Atlantic seaboard formed agricultural-based economies. This type of economy favored permanent villages that consisted of stable housing due to the fact that the people needed to stay in one place so they could tend to their crops. The Western Hemisphere is the part of the world that makes up the Americas. Europeans deemed it the New World. Pre-Columbus estimates range from 30 to 75 million Native Americans. The Spanish and Portuguese colonized large swaths of it and exploited Native Americans for resources and cash crops. Moving on to Portuguese exploration, Prince Henry the Navigator helped fund advances in sailing, especially the caravel sail that greatly aided in long-distance travel against unfavorable winds. He also funded expeditions to the west coast of Africa. Later, the Portuguese would make it around the Horn of Africa, opening up the possibility of lucrative silk and spice trade links with Asia. This would influence other European nations, especially Spain, to fund bold expeditions like Columbus transatlantic voyages. Spanish exploration of the Americas started in 1492. The main reasons were to find a trade route to Asia, find gold and silver, convert peoples to Christianity, and increase the power and prestige of their nation. When the Spanish reached the Americas, they spread deadly epidemics, created a racially mixed population, and a caste system defined by the intermixture among Spanish settlers, Africans, and Native Americans. In West Africa, there had existed great empires like the Songhai and Mali, but by the time of European exploration, it was fragmented into many competing West African kingdoms and tribes. Some of them partnered with European nations to enslave other Africans. This was part of the triangle trade, in which African slave labor went to the New World and were forced to mine resources and produce cash crops. The profits from the cash crops and resources went to European investors, traders, and monarchs, and some of those profits went towards increasing the slave trade. In the encomienda system, the Spanish capitalized on pre-existing Native American systems of tribute. The crown gave Spanish conquistadors large swaths of land to claim tribute in labor and goods from Native American communities. Also, Spanish officials co-opted the Inca Mita system, which made native laborers available for forced work in the silver mines. Plantation-based agriculture emerged after the discovery of the Americas. The crops that could be grown in the New World were sought after in Europe, creating the need for plantations to grow crops like tobacco and sugar. An example of this process is the Portuguese and their colony in Brazil. This land was a great growing environment for sugar. As a result, the Portuguese set up mostly independent plantations, as the entire process of cultivating and refining sugar was done on site. At first, the natives were expected to be the workers. However, the diseases that the Europeans brought over killed many of them. One of the worst diseases was smallpox. The Portuguese then turned to Africans to work on the fields. By 1620, most of the plantations were using African laborers. Other crops that were grown in the Caribbean were indigo, tobacco, cotton, cacao, and ginger. Similar to Brazil, the cash crop of sugar ended up being the largest one cultivated. In addition, the North American colonies also developed plantations, especially in the Chesapeake area to start with. In this area, tobacco was one of the main crops grown. Due to the spread of disease, African Americans gradually replaced Native Americans as slave laborers. Plantation colonies in Brazil were the first to undergo this change. The declining population of indentured servants also contributed to the reliance upon Africans for slave labor. Typically, slaves worked on cash crop plantations and also in mines. The Spanish and Portuguese became leading empire builders in Period 1 because of their successful colonization of the Americas. Their conquistadors were responsible for the death of many native tribes, both by force and by transmission of diseases. They also didn't pay much attention to the culture and traditions of the native people. The Spanish justified their conquest by saying they were bearers of civilization. Other European powers like the British, French, and Dutch were following closely behind. Now taking a look at the transition from feudalism to capitalism. Before the Age of Exploration, Europe had a feudal economy and society. That type of economy was very localized, as new lands were discovered and conquered by European empires. European merchants, investors, and planters garnered profits of the transatlantic trade. However, this trade was highly regulated in a mercantilist economy. Nations wanted to decrease imports from foreign countries and increase exports. This made the European monarchs, like those of Spain and England, extremely wealthy, as well as some merchants, investors, and planters. Stretching well past Period 1, as more profitable markets were discovered in the New World, the private economy grew and became more capitalistic. Merchants, planters, and consumers were deciding the selling and buying prices. Okay, on to the racist idea of white superiority. For various reasons, Europeans felt they were superior to Native Americans and Africans. In Period 1, a few of the reasons Europeans felt this way were: most Europeans were Christians, and they felt that that was the one true religion. There were also many differences in culture between the groups, and Europeans thought their cultural ideals were superior. And at this time, Europeans had technological superiority in a few key areas, like military equipment. During Period 1, there was an influx of Europeans to the Americas. With them, they also brought enslaved Africans. This greatly affected the Native Americans, with the Europeans trying to force their beliefs and ideals onto them. The Africans and natives tried desperately to maintain their cultural autonomy, or in other words, they tried to preserve their culture and religion. Along with cultural autonomy, Native Americans attempted to preserve their political autonomy from European rule, especially the Spanish and Portuguese in Period 1. The Mexica, also known as the Aztecs, and Inca, fought against the conquistadors. Disease and technological differences made resisting Spanish colonization and rule near impossible. However, some were successful in resisting Spanish domination, especially those with more nomadic hunter-gatherer ways, like in the American Southwest and Great Plains areas. Finally, the all-important Columbian Exchange. This was the widespread transfer of plants, animals, culture, human populations, technology, diseases, and ideas from the Americas, West Africa, and Europe in the 15th and 16th centuries. Some examples include the different peoples from Africa and Europe, along with diseases and livestock like horses that went to the New World. Some examples of things going from the New World to the Old World include important foods like corn and potatoes that allow for greater crop yields and population growth. Okay, that does it for the key terms of Period 1. Subscribe to the channel for more APUSH review and primary source explanations.